Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started here. I'm gonna go around um Plano, Texas. That's where I went to high school. Wow, this is crazy.
I
Salt Lake
found your
City.
locker, just so you know.
This
John,
is
can you
why.
send some of the sun down here?
Yeah.
We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to go through and just let everybody know who is joining us today, and then we can kind of go around alphabetically if I don't screw up the alphabet. And everybody can kind of do a quick introduction. But we have John Keene, ServiceMinder CEO and founder, Claire Fike from Company Cam, our franchise partner manager, Piper Graffini from Web Punch, the chief happiness officer, Ryan Hicks from FSN, the franchise supplier network, and Eric Johnston from Empower Brands and Franchise Technology Solutions. I'm John Tomlin with Company Cam. John, I will start with you to just give us a quick introduction. We're both
Uh,
named John, so it has to be you.
for the role of this webinar, I shall be John the Lesser. You should be John the Greater. But after it switches back the other way. Yes, I'm John, founder here at ServiceMinder. So I usually describe my role here as if it works, then it means I hired great people. And if it doesn't, it's my fault and I'm sorry. We basically have a platform for running franchise home services, right? All of our customers are franchise brands. Everybody, those brands are home services. So call a guy to do a thing and you get paid. And that's what our platform helps you do. So
Very
thanks.
good. And I said alphabetical, but I decided it's much better if I go in the order of which I can see everybody, which may be different on everybody's screen. But let me go to Piper Graffini from Web Punch. How are you?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks, John the Lesser. um, I'm the Chief Happiness Officer at Web Punch, a client experience, a brand experience company where we really love to take the pulse of customers and more than anything, an online presence where it comes to online reputation, reviews, generating those reviews, gathering feedback, and understanding the whole experience of the brands and businesses.
Fantastic. Ryan Hicks from FSN Franchise Supplier Network. How are you?
I am excellent. Piper, I'm happier here on this call. I love the title, and
Good.
I'll call both of you John the Great. But I'm Ryan Hicks. I'm managing partner of Franchise Supplier Network. We help franchisors and franchisees with supplier search, discovery, recommendations. We have north of 100, now 120 vetted and kind of pre-vetted, pre-approved supplier partners. Tremendous resource for franchise brands. I'm also, just a fun fact, I'm also invested now into my third emerging franchise brand. Yeah, passive investments, but I also get to see an experience from that angle.
Very cool. Eric Johnston, Empower Brands Franchise Technology Solutions. How are you?
Yeah, doing good. Thanks for having us. So Empower Brands, we're a portfolio company. We've got 8 residential home services brands and 2 commercial B2B brands. And I head up the technology team for the residential brands here.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Claire Fike, Company Cam Franchise Partner Manager. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm glad we're all here today and I'm glad we got to get everybody together. So this is it's gonna be a fun time, especially with the time of year. Things are about to get crazy if they haven't already, right? So but yeah, I handle all of our relationships with our franchises that Company Cam works with, but Company Cam's a photo documentation solution that integrates into many field management or CRM softwares. We do integrate with ServiceMinder. So super happy to be here. Glad everybody made it and excited to jump in.
Absolutely. Real quick, I'll say it one more time. If you do want to get questions in, we'll have a Q&A at the end. Just make sure to post it in the webinar chat. Make sure that the 2 is selected for everyone so we can all see the question. And if you just joined us late, don't forget to grab that poll/survey. The pre-webinar poll, we'll have one at the end as well, just to answer that one question for us. Let's get to the questions. I'm going to start off with Eric and Ryan on this one. A lot of people would go straight to hiring to get on top of the busy season. Where do you see that being problematic? And I will go alphabetical this time. So I'll start with Eric and then I will roll it over to Ryan.
All right. Well, I guess the first question I would ask is, have you maximized the efficiencies on your current team? If you're throwing bodies at problems during the busy season, what are you going to do with those folks when things slow down? Takes a lot of time and investment to bring somebody up to speed. So answer that question first. If you do need to add a body to the team, how are you going to train that person? Do you have an LMS in place? You know, it is a burden for senior staff to have to take that person on the road with them and get them up to speed. So just make sure you've got a plan and an onboarding plan in place.
Ryan.
Yeah, I would pipe in first with just a statement. You know, as I was thinking through this, I understand that there's a lot of different types of brands in the audience, and it ranges from just adding a body to, you know, I've seen several instances where, you know, there's lots of bodies that need to be added. But first and foremost is and the way that the question was framed is, you know, can that be problematic? I would say that franchisees, employees are our, as you know, franchisors are our touch point with the world. We ultimately live and die by, you know, their the perception of not only the perception, but the quality of service that they provide. And so I have some personal stories that I could share in regard to that, but I won't dig too deep into it. But first and foremost, the questions that were just asked and posed are solid ones. I tend to say when I look at the supply and demand curve, I would rather have a you know, over demand, and I'm trying to figure out the supply, but the supply is quality, and our supply at this, you know, kind of in this conversation is related to labor. And so I would kind of think through it in that vein. And you know, training, onboarding, and all of that obviously is tremendously important. So I think these are things that everybody here knows, but just add folks and add the right folks when needed.
You guys did such an excellent job with this question. The second one's for you as well. What are some of those quick wins? I guess if you're not looking at the biggest things to tackle, but if you're looking for some quick wins to get new employees as you're adding new employees ready for the busy season, what are some of those quick wins? And maybe I'll go in reverse this time and start with you, Ryan. Like what would you say some quick wins with new employees would be, kind of preparing for things as they ramp up?
Absolutely. Not speaking to the entire hiring process, and, you know, values aren't something that sit on a wall. And, you know, I can dig deep because obviously a lot of people are, maybe you're in sectors where there's licensed folks that you have to go after. It's really challenging. I think that's a complete separate topic. But I think that, you know, having your set training process, making that not only just tactical training, but educational also around the ethos of the company. But I think a quick win is, you know, I'm a fan of kind of a, you know, apprentice type model. So, you know, how quickly can you get someone out in the field, whether it's observing? I've seen several different flavors of this, but essentially not only the pre-training and onboarding, but also you know, a supervised way to get folks in the field, I think could be a quick win. And there's a lot of things that you can do as it relates to quick wins. I don't want to speak too long. I'll toss it over and see what else my counterpart has to say on this topic.
Yeah, I guess for us, we do utilize the LMS side of things heavily just to not burden the staff that needs to be out there producing at that time. So having a kind of a roadmap or a career path, if you will, for those new junior techs, right? What can they progress through the e-learning side of things? And a lot of our franchisees will incentivize new hires to get through that process and get out in their own van, on the road, productive on their own. Beyond that, I mean, the nice thing with having the CRM systems in place is you have the ability to go back and review each of those jobs and how they're interacting with the databases. So for new hires, we typically like to sit them down at the end of the day and review today's jobs. Just making sure we can call out what they did good, where they need to, you know, work on things. And the nice thing with ServiceMinder is we used unapproved invoices. So the client is not getting the final bill from that junior tech until we've had a chance to sit down and scrutinize it and approve it and send it out.
Very good. John, I'm going to bring you in on this one along with Eric. Tips on getting clients scheduled prior to the busy season. And John, I'll start with you on this one. Oh, I think he's muted.
You see the lips move, then you see the eyes move to find the mute button. That's how you do that. Yeah. So one of the things that we preach is, reach out early and reach out often, right? Because especially if it's a kind of a seasonal type of thing where you're going to go visit customers kind of all summer, all season long or whatever, right? You want to kind of get ahead of the curve, especially you're in the northern climates where like when you're covered in 8 feet of snow, nothing's going on. And then when the snow melts, the phone starts ringing. Well, while there's still snow, start reaching out ahead of time. Focus on maybe your largest lifetime value customers first to make sure they get the preferred slots if that's a thing that you have. Or maybe you reach out based on geography, right? So you're sending guys to kind of the same neighborhoods as you roll through doing whatever it is that you do. But the key thing is start early, start often. Don't wait for the phone to start ringing saying, we should probably reach out to all of our customers and get them started. Plan ahead.
Eric?
Absolutely. Yeah, we live that every day. Technicians in the field, even when we're not getting into busy season, summer season, fall season, they're upselling folks on maintenance plans. So we're getting those folks already in the hopper for next year. And then as we start to wind down the season, we hit the email campaigns pretty heavily around the holiday seasons and then getting into the early part of the year. As the season starts to ramp up, we kind of move away from our maintenance plans and getting folks signed up and in the hopper for that. And we just go after, that pay per visit type client where we're just going to go out one time at the beginning of the year. But all that, we do that just to build the density. So when we do go into our routing, we have some high efficiency routes, and then we go after and try and confirm with the clients. So build the most efficient route you can up front, and then communicate that to the client that this is your slot and work with, the 10% that need to reschedule.
I'm going to pose this one to John and Claire. When it comes to a business tech stack, how can you make sure your staff is using it correctly? And Claire, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, part of me almost wants John to actually start, because as we say at Company Cam, like we're not the core to your system, right? We're not your source of truth. We link into your source of truth. And that's kind of where ServiceMinder fits. So John, I'll actually have you start first, and then I think I'll be able to echo.
Awesome. Yeah. I think Eric kind of touched on this a little bit on one of his answers, which is like review the data, right? So if you're sending out new guys, more than likely they're interacting. Well, first off, make sure you're using a system that's capturing data, right? If you're not doing that, then that's step one. But then once you have that, use it, right? So like if they're supposed to, record notes or take pictures when they complete a thing, or, fill out or answer us, some questions or whatever, make sure they did. Go review that data at the end of the day. Look at the calendar, sort by like technician, and then go look at the new guy and click through all of those and make sure they did all those things. If you have a requirement for them to, capture pictures, right? ServiceMinder, and I'm sure others do too, have a way to kind of, hey, let me show me all the pictures taken by everybody today, right? Then you can kind of see what the scope of the work was that was done. If you're noticing, and you can see who took those pictures, right? So if you're noticing, hey, Bob's not taking good pictures, maybe go sign him up for a photography class or something. But, essentially you want to look at the output. In today's world, right, the output is not only customer satisfaction and feedback, right? That's a toss to Piper, right? But also, customer satisfaction is driven by, did you capture the data and deliver the good service? And so look at the data and see what it tells you.
Yeah,
Back to you, Claire, in the booth.
For sure. I had a few points that I wanted to make. I think like when it comes to making sure that your staff is, using it correctly. Cause right. That's what that was our question. Yeah. I have a few questions in my head. Yeah. So making sure that you're using it correctly. I really believe at a company that someone at your company, whether that's your project manager or your office manager, someone needs to own the software. Someone needs to own what that means is like they need to know the ins and outs of that software and be fully trained. They need to have their support contact back at the software company, right, that they can reach out to if there are questions. And they need to also manage to make sure that you're having, even if it's annual or maybe it's quarterly trainings, right, with your team to make sure that, hey, we're using this effectively. Everybody knows what's new. And, we're up to speed. We're getting the most out of what we're paying for, right? So I think that's incredibly important. I also think onboarding your team and having them test and train with your softwares rather than just saying like, hey, this is what we use and throwing them to the wolves. Like, have them test and train on it, have them mess around with it, have like a test within Company Cam. We have like a lot of people have a test project where they say, hey, go in and see some of the different ways that we utilize it, how you can mark up photos, how you can take photos, just test it out. Have them get in there and get dirty with it. And I think, John, that was something that I was also going to say was, if you have a checklist piece within your softwares, use that. Because the last thing I was going to say was, make it as easy as possible for your team member, for your employees, to use this software. Because I've seen so many people invest in really expensive, heavy tech softwares, and their team doesn't want to use it because they weren't either trained on it, they don't understand why it's important for them, or it's really, really hard to use. So make it easy for them. Bring something in for them that they know how to use it, they can access it in the field, and when they have questions, they know who to go to. So that's one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, Dr. Paul, one thing on your comment, which to basically talking about training and understanding and knowledge, right? And since our audience is all franchisors, franchisees, right? Don't forget that you've got a network that you can rely on, right? So as an individual owner, reach out to the Eric at your brand and say, hey, I want to make sure I'm using all the right things. Do you have some more training that I can go through? Or what's some of the new things that we should be doing this season, right? Be engaged with the brand. You're paying for that, right? So take advantage of using that to validate, are we doing the things we're supposed to do? Reach out to other owners, right? Because they may have tips and tricks that they've learned that has worked well with them, especially if you're a new franchisee. Like, leverage the network, leverage the brand, because not everything's always written down, right? Sometimes it's just kind of word of mouth, and you got to find your way by talking to other people and sharing common experiences. So definitely would leverage that as a part of your tech stack migration or learning process.
Yeah, software adoption, one of the biggest topics about we get every single day. This one is for Piper. How can a home service business leverage its social and digital marketing strategies to promote its services in a highly competitive market?
Well, John, the options are endless. I think the biggest place to focus, of course, is where everybody is going to find their services, which is Google. So starting with your Google page, not letting it just sort of sit there and not do anything for you, taking advantage of what Google has to offer. Even on the free organic listings, things like posts and products. We have a slew of information when it comes to optimizing Google pages. A huge piece, of course, when it comes to the competitive market and what everybody's paying attention to, as well as Google, when it comes to the SEO and pieces of really optimizing to make sure that you're coming up first in organic search, are reviews. So the more that you can take advantage of getting those reviews, having happy clients, really post online. I like to call it it's like your billboard. This is where people are going to search, and they are looking to the recommendations of who's saying what online. So really getting those happy customers to post reviews as early as possible on your page, and keeping up with those responses. That's another key element. Not enough businesses respond to those reviews, so making sure you're doing that as well.
Fantastic. This one is for Claire and John again. Clients want as much transparency as they can get on a project. How can services establish effective communication with the clients to maintain that transparency? And John, I'll start with you this time.
Communicate early, communicate often, right? Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you told them, right? This we've been learning since grade school, right? So you want to maybe that's not true, but most consumers will never tell you, hey, stop telling me so much stuff about my project, right? They want to know, like, when are you coming? What are you going to do? How long is it going to take? Do I need to be there? So take advantage of, finding out how they want to communicate, right? Is it email? Is it text? Is it call me on the phone, right? Understand those communication preferences, and then use those to communicate with them so that they know what to expect. And then even go so far as to say, hey, we're coming next week for this thing. I'm going to shoot you an email with a short video that shows what we're going to do when we're there, right? Just stuff that kind of helps prepare for when they get there as to what the process is going to be, so that you eliminate the surprises, right? Because that's what customers go to Google for the 1-star review is when they were surprised. So eliminate the opportunity for them to get surprised by telling them more than they need to know, and that will grease the skids for when the guy gets there.
Claire?
Yeah, I'll definitely piggyback off of that for sure. Obviously, from my standpoint, we are all about visual documentation, and transparency is elevated when you have visual documentation rather than just written or even verbal, right? So really where I always start is like, be very clear to your teams, like who is documenting, who is required to be taking photos. And if you're taking photos, have clear requirements on what kind of photos you want to be taken, to make it very, very surface level: before photos, during photos, after photos, right? At least make sure that's happening. And then paint the picture. So if you're able to take photos, and then if you're able to mark up your photos, draw notes on your photos, circle things, like it's funny, you know, even as adults, we still are kind of kids. We want things to be pointed out for us very clearly. It's not clear to them what might be very clear to you. So if you're able to take some just initial photos before you start work, circle what's going on, what you're looking at, what you're going to be focusing on, and sending that to them, and then being able to show what happened after work was completed, it just creates a really beautiful, transparent picture for them, that doesn't then make them have to come back and chase you down for answers, right? Or they have questions for things that you may or may not have done, right? So, and then lastly, yes, share regularly and share often. We think that, again, at Company Cam, you should be able to share your documentation as easily as possible. So whatever system you choose to go with, whether, you know, your CRM or whatever you choose to go with, make sure it makes it easy to get that data out to your customers. So,
Yeah. One last comment real quick. Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah. No, go ahead.
Just don't underestimate the power of before and after.
Mm.
Right. So take the picture of what it looked like when you got there, and then the picture of what it looked like when you left, especially if you're at in a project where you're doing stuff to the home, right? You know, how many times have you had somebody call saying, "Hey, you broke my bush," you know, or whatever, right? If you took a picture that was before, you know, the consumer would see, oh, this is the before picture and the bush was damaged. I didn't realize that was there. We should go fix that, as opposed to calling you and saying, "Hey, why'd you break my bush?"
mm-hmm.
And from a Company Cam knowledge standpoint, so, you know, as Claire said, being specific about what type of photo, the zoom out is just as important as the zoom in, and noting what that is and what you want before you get to the project is important. Customer service is important year round, but obviously it's important to handle it when you're busy just as much as when you're slow. So for Piper and Claire, how can businesses ensure that they're still delivering exceptional customer service amidst peak demand periods? And Piper, I'll start with you.
WebPunch provides primarily NPS surveys, which are crucial to service businesses. Understanding how that customer feels, and making it very easy for them to provide that feedback. NPS is, of course, just a one-question survey asking how likely they are to recommend, and that provides a huge granular effect on understanding what they're feeling. And then the next step is true follow-up. Don't just let that linger. Close the loop, follow up on your positives, get those referrals out there. And then, of course, if there are some things that need to be adjusted, get with them, follow up. I love to say that your detractors, who are people that give on a scale of 0 to 10, those people that give 6 and below ratings, they can become your biggest promoters because you follow up with them. You do the right thing. You listen to their feedback. You make those changes, and they feel like they have some power as well. And they've provided you with some exceptional advice, and you've taken it. And that's like, everybody loves to hear that. So major follow up. Make sure you are getting that feedback and following up on it.
Claire?
Yeah, for sure. I would just say, I think what Piper just said was phenomenal. I kind of wanted to go back to also what we kind of landed on with our last question, which was before and afters. I think that exceptional customer service truly is to be transparent and be able to provide that exactly that. What did it look like before? What is it going to look like after? And just give them that directly. And then being able to sprinkle in, again, progression. What did we do? What did things look like throughout the progression of things? I think that that's exceptional customer service. And if you can do that easily and quickly with whatever technology you choose, awesome. I think another thing, though, that's really important is if you want to have exceptional customer service, you have to have exceptional organization on the back end. Because if you want to provide a transparency to your customers, then you have to be able to easily find that information that you need to share with them, whether that's pictures or anything, right? And the amount of people I talk to that say, yeah, we document, we write these things down, we take notes, that's the procedure. And I say, okay, is it easy to find? No, they can't find it. So what's the point of any of this documentation, especially when you're out in the field, if you can't use it? So really start to look at your back end and how things are organized and how easily things are accessible to your team when you're thinking about customer service.
I'm going to throw this one to Ryan, Eric, and John, and we'll go in that order. Your tech stack is a core part of business operations. So how do you analyze, before the season truly gets busy, how do you analyze and evaluate that software? What is or isn't working? What needs to go? What needs to stay? And again, I'll start with John on this one and go to Eric and then Ryan. How do you analyze and evaluate that before the busy season so you really ensure that you're set up for success?
Well, we recommend analyzing to see whether you're using ServiceMinder or not. And if you're not, you should use it. And then you're in good shape. But
well done. Well done.
Barring all of that, let's say you're not, how else do you do it? Really it comes down to, looking at how you use the process, right? Like software is a series of buttons and forms and things you click, right? And so when you look at kind of your overall business delivery process, what we kind of call the factory of your business, right? Leads come in the front door and money goes into your bank account out the back door. What happens in the middle? Like when you answer the phone, how many clicks and searches and things does somebody have to do? When a technician's in the field finishing out a thing, how many buttons is he clicking? How many apps does he have to use? Does he have to switch between 3 things and do steps, right? Those are all things that cause operational friction, right? Which you're not thinking about, but it's costing you money, right? If you're adding 10 minutes of paperwork button clicking time as opposed to fill one field, 3 clicks, and then everything else magically happens, right? You're paying for those 10 minutes. So those are the things we look at when you look at any kind of technology solution that somebody's using. How can you make it better? You want to look at how it's being used. What are people doing? If it's a manual process, are they 100% accurate every time? Probably not. In addition to the time, so stuff gets missed, stuff takes time to do. If it's a manual process where you're copying data between systems, there's going to be inaccuracies, right? Look at all of those touch points and make sure that you've got that, as optimal as possible from a technology perspective.
Eric, I'll go to you.
Yeah, so I guess we have an advisory council for every brand, right? We have a brand team that supports every brand, and then we have shared services teams like accounting, marketing, IT. All those groups have to work closely together. So we're identifying issues during busy season. Immediately as things start to settle down for us, that's typically like June. We'll have our quarterly meetings, prioritize what we can try and solve, and then we kick off task force throughout the summer and the fall. So that task force is responsible for solving that issue and then presenting the solution to the FAC and the brand team and the leadership. We get approval. Then we move on to documenting the SOPs, creating some trading literature around it, and then we start rolling that out later in the fall through the winter. And then we have an annual meeting every spring or early, February. That's always a topic of discussion from the IT standpoint is what system updates have we made? Let's recap that stuff. And this is how you're going to execute going into busy season. And then we'll find the next set of issues and just repeat the process for the next year. But during busy season, it's like freeze all processes, right? Run the plan. We'll figure out where we can flex after that. But we try not to roll out anything during the busy season.
Ryan, I'll finish up with you.
Yeah, what Eric and John laid out is a really, really good framework. And if people want some kind of tactical advice, if you haven't set up an advisory council yet, different brands have different names for it, but it's really important to engage the system, because going back to what we talked about before, the kind of the adoption challenge that oftentimes exists. So I'll try to give kind of a slightly different flavor and way to think of it, knowing that the process that was just stated is really, really sound. First of all, I think about it in two components just to make it simple, because this is, kind of a really large question, because technology touches every part of our businesses. I think about it in terms of core platforms, and I think about it in terms of there's also point solutions. And one generalized comment that I would make, especially as we live in this kind of AI crazed world where there's really cool tools popping up everywhere, don't create bolt-on problems by bolting on new softwares. So be measured as you kind of look at data and analyze. And I would kind of create an acronym as you even look at, what is, as you're auditing your current tech stack. I have a simple kind of, I call it CPU because it rhymes with tech, but basically like you can analyze costs, do a cost assessment, performance metrics, which is obviously critical. And what John just spoke to, if you do not have kind of from a performance perspective, if you do not have baseline understanding of performance for anything that's happening in your software realm, then you have to get that in place, which goes back to the core platforms. But and the third is usage. So cost, performance, usage. So you're looking at that. And then obviously as you're gathering feedback, you're not only gathering feedback from that advisory council, but from your whole system, also from your customers, and you're looking for the gaps, and you really need to focus it and prioritize it based on, what are the levers that are going to actually move the business? What are the KPIs, if you will? Whether that's full-time equivalents, because you have a number of folks that are part-time. There's a lot of different ways to look at that, but really understand and know your metrics. There's a lot of fancy, awesome things out there. And I'm a proponent of the build, measure, learn, test fast. I think we were going to talk about that here in a moment, but that's what I would do. And the last thing that I would say is, as you're engaging, so let's say that you've analyzed something that you need to put in place, you're defining scope. And maybe this is something on Franchise Supplier Network. We have a bunch of resources on this process-wise. I'll make sure, if we don't have it readily available, I'll make sure we have for the advisory council as it relates to this topic there. We have a lot of kind of documentation on this. But one of the things that I would encourage brands to do as you're engaging with suppliers, communicate well with them. Like, I'm talking prospective suppliers that you're looking to work with. Oftentimes brands think of supplier folks as, I don't want to be inundated by suppliers, et cetera, but you're mining for potential integral partners of your business. Suppliers are a really big part of the three-legged stool that makes franchising go round. And communicate with them. If your intention is just kicking tires, tell that to them. If you have a defined scope and an ideal timeline, things like that, communicate well. Don't look at salespeople just as salespeople. Don't overlook culture match. So when you're in that process, there are other considerations outside of core technology, because I know the question's about software, core technology considerations, but there's a lot to keep in mind. This is a topic, I think, of an entire webinar, but I'll pause there.
No, it's a great segue, because the next question is, to this point, is you have got, and we have every day, I feel like you have more choices now than ever in terms of software, quote unquote, solutions. So when you're looking at all the new tech that seemingly launches by the minute, how do you plan what's necessary to implement in your organization to streamline those operations and manage kind of the increased demand effectively versus, I'm just bolting on, is a great way to put it, I'm just bolting on things that may not be a solution. And I'm going to start with Eric on this one. How do you figure out, okay, what do I need and what's unnecessary at this time to kind of handle increased demand as things are growing?
I mean, going back to what Ryan said of picking your partners carefully, right? Yep. So, I mean, we've got great partners, whether that's distributors or it's software vendors or it's, digital marketing vendors. They're working with other businesses that have the same issues that we have, right? And a lot of times they're 2 questions ahead of where we're at in our journey with that thing. So make sure that you're having more than just those little conversations with your vendors and your partners, because you're going to learn a lot from folks who have been there before. And to that extent, also the IFA community, if you guys are in franchising and you're not active in the IFA, I mean, that can be such a relief to know that, yes, everybody has this problem and these 70% have figured out how to solve it and they're willing to share that with you.
Sure. Claire, I'll go to you next and we'll finish with John.
Yeah, I think we've touched on it a few times, so I'll be quick, but my two main call outs is user friendliness. Is your team actually going to use it? The amount of times I hear people say, you know, we have like 6 different apps and we're paying for all of them and I don't even know if people are using it. And I think back and I'm like, well, what was your process when bringing on this new software and bringing on this new app? So just go back to the basics and ask your team if they're even using it. Second would be like, you have to, I know that a lot of people are going to compare and contrast cost, right? And be like, hey, well, we want the best cost savings, so we'll go with this. When potentially you could pay a little bit extra, but you're going to get a way better tech stack, right? So the way I think you should look at it, and I think that John definitely touched on this already, is how much time is it saving you and how much time is it saving your team out in the field actually, right? You know, is it going to take 6 steps to complete something or to get to somewhere in the software, or is it going to take 1 click? You have to really start to think about how are they actually going to be using it, right? Not just necessarily what's the cheapest option out there.
John, did you want to finish up with anything? Oh, I think he's on mute.
I'm a rookie. Sorry. I think part of it is also kind of managing the expectations, both at the location level and the brand level. Like so many times, you know, people see the shiny new thing and they go, man, this is going to automate our business top to bottom. 1 click does it all. So great. We're going to install it on a Friday. We're going to come in on a Monday and boom, it's all automated. Like that never happens, right? It's an integral, you know, evolutionary learning process. So figure out kind of what the core first steps are, do that, get that working, and then iterate over that to enable more functionality, or maybe decide, do you need to bolt another thing on or plug in something else that is already supported by the core feature, but you know, you delay that till you have a little more experience in how you're going to use it. Because definitely one of the things we've noticed too, especially working with brands and franchisees, like the brand thinks they know how their franchisees use it, but sometimes you don't really know what really is going on until you get to the franchisees and you figure, oh, this is really how they're using it. Yes, they're capturing the data and you're using your tool, but they're doing it differently than you think. We could make some changes to configure it to work the way they really want to use it, but still give you the control on the data that the brand needs to be effective as well. So manage all those expectations, measure it all, and allow learning and engagement time so that you're successful. If you roll out too much and too big, you're going to get low utilization, low satisfaction, low engagement, and it's going to look like a train wreck. When if you pace it out right, it could be the best thing you ever did.
And to that point, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit, so that we can keep this kind of a broad answer, but how can franchises implement those new tools or update existing tools to truly help during the busy season? And Eric, I'll start with you and go to John and then Ryan.
This comes back to the communication piece to me, is making sure that, you know, your brand team, your support teams, your franchisees are aligned on what you're trying to solve for and where you guys are going to gain the most efficiencies back during busy season. And right now during busy season, if your franchisees are struggling or you're struggling as a franchisee, make sure you're sending that stuff up the ladder. So when these folks do get back together and start talking about issues, that you are on the agenda and this thing's getting discussed and rolled out next year.
John?
Yeah, it's kind of like I was saying in the earlier discussion, right? It's manage the expectations, have a plan, right? Don't try to do everything at once, right? Do it incrementally, lock in the gains, rinse and repeat.
Ryan?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to something that Eric said in the previous question, and he mentioned kind of community. So first and foremost, we all lived through COVID. I swore I would never even mention it again, but we very quickly had to change lots of things. And I thought that that was kind of a cool example that our organizations can react quickly. So if there's something that's mission critical, then definitely, boom, all in on that and figure out a solution to that problem. I would say that kind of from a general perspective, a lot of brands have solved the challenges that may be popping up. So not only leverage the ideas from the network and the system, not just the FAC, but the entire system and the whole, like the team, but also there are a lot of people that are willing, like counterparts, colleagues, not even necessarily competitors, but it's wild that competitors will be on panels sharing ideas together. And so IFA is a good one. Franchisors.com, our family, kind of our sister company, puts on a lot of events, and it's really awesome to see people connecting and just asking other folks what they use. Franchise Supplier Network is a really solid resource. We see a ton of challenges and solutions to those challenges. So leverage the community. And the last thing that I'll say is from there's essentially different brands call it different things, but you have your some form of an advisory council, etc., right? And you have a process for supplier selection, implementation, and that crosses all different veins of the main macro departments of a brand. But especially with how fast the world is moving, it's almost like, think about almost like an innovation committee. And if there's something that's rapid and quick that you really need to find solution for during a busy season, do not be afraid to take the lean approach, build, measure, learn. You will have franchisees that will sign up to test things, and you can very quickly build, measure, learn. Someone mentioned earlier talking about the feedback loop. That's super important. But don't be afraid to kind of have that approach and micro test. So I always say test quickly, scale very, very responsibly. And that's not to say that you're not just going to rip and replace a core platform like John's platform, right? It's kind of point solution. That's why I broke out earlier, platform versus point solution. So that's a few ideas that might be valuable for some folks.
That's fantastic. We got a couple questions left, but I just want to remind everybody that if you do have a question for the Q&A, to get it into the webinar chat, and we will also have a end survey for everybody to take when we are finished. So get those questions in if you have them. And we'll go to this question next. This one's for Piper and Claire. How can you gather not only customer feedback for overall satisfaction, but also the employee feedback? So where you can really look at areas for internal improvements and overall service quality. And Piper, I'll start with you.
We go back to NPS. It's definitely an NPS. You do a team NPS or employee NPS, whatever you want to call it. You're gauging from very early on in the hiring process to, then more segmented. So you've spread it out to understand how that employee is feeling. You can also take, of course, those really happy employees and get them to almost recruit online. So encouraging them to go onto Indeed, Glassdoor, and get some more awesome employees that are working really well. And it's really, again, of course, closing the loop, following up, making sure that you're really honing into whatever those employees are saying, and focusing on how you can make changes for the better with their input.
Claire. Oh, Claire's muted.
See, it's not just
I
me.
pulled a John. Piper spoke really well on employee feedback. I'll just speak a little bit on customer feedback. Again, like I'll just go back to the before and after photos to close the loop. When you're all done with work, and I'm talking about people out in the field doing the work, make it really easy for them. Again, so if you can provide like a before and after photo within Company Cam, you can make them on other apps as well. But if you can provide a before and after photo, or just a few photos of work completed, and then just simply just say, hey, how did this go for you? What was the communication like? Did you like the way that we worked with you? Is there anything we could have done differently? And then literally send them a text with that photo, with that before and after photo, and say, hey, here's a photo. If you'd be willing to just throw a review online for us really quick. It sounds like you had, hopefully, if they said good things about you in that conversation, it sounds like you had a good experience. Here's a quick photo. If you just want to throw a few lines of, your feedback, that would be great. And then slowly but surely, you start to see all your customer feedback comes in pretty easily because you gave them an easy avenue to do it. Then you can start watching it come in. So yeah, those are just a few points. Never be afraid to ask, and make it easy for them.
Perfect. Last question today, and this one is for Eric, John, and Claire. Let's talk about contingency plans and the old CYA protocol. What tools or processes do you feel like a business should set up to make sure things are communicated in a timely manner? And John, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think kind of like what I opened up with at the beginning, which is communicate early, communicate often, tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them, right? Provide ways for them to confirm that they got what you heard, right? Like I need to be at your house at 10. You have to be there so I can get in the house to do the thing. Please confirm you'll be there, right? I think being able to coordinate so that the customer knows what to expect, right? That helps. But then in the case where they don't, if a technician gets to a house and he's supposed to be there for 2 hours and the customer wasn't there, what's your fallback plan? Well, just go on to the next thing, right? But what if you can't get there early, right? Give them ways to find stuff to fill the time, right? So I have some backups to be able to kind of fill dead time or whatever. But also, make it easy for the teams to work together to kind of solve problems, right? If they're falling behind on a job and they need to be able to loop in somebody else to come help them close it out so it doesn't spill over to the next day, kind of vehicles break down, right? You're doing irrigation work and the line you are not working on sprung a leak. Just there's all sorts of things that can go wrong. You want to make sure that you have the customer looped in, the employees looped in, the back office looped in, so that you can communicate, respond, and deal with.
Perfect. Claire, I'll go to you next, and then we'll finish with Eric.
Yeah. On the CYA end of things, make sure you have a good tool to cover your butt. And in this day and age, again, we're in the business of visual documentation here at Company Cam. Make sure you have a tool to make it, again, easy to document and easy to and make sure you're doing definitely before and definitely after, right? The before is where you're going to save a lot of money. Again, I'll bring up another instance. I've had how many customers that I've worked with in lots of franchisees that have come up to me and said one single photo has saved us a couple $1,000s, if not more, just because somebody claimed that we caused an issue. Especially if you're a trade that comes in at the very end, like say a painter, you're the one that normally gets stuck with a lot of things. That gets stuck with a lot of blame. So it's really important for your team to know that before they touch anything, they are taking a video or they are taking photos, and those are organized. So if you ever need to go back to them for any reason, you can find them and you can cover yourself.
Yeah. Eric?
Yeah. So communication, make sure your messaging is consistent on your marketing assets, your website, when you're picking up the phone, how you're training your technicians to deal with stuff on site. That's huge. Making sure you guys have terms and agreements and service agreements up to date and accurate, and that you're actually getting clients to sign off on that stuff if you have a bigger project, right? So just, you can hand that off to your legal team when you need to. And then the before and after pics, it's a no-brainer. It's easy for those guys to snap stuff out in the field. It's easy to prompt them to do that, and it will save your butt. And then the other thing that we've done with a few of the brands is checklists, right? So whether it's we're starting a job or we're finishing a job or we're going for a maintenance visit, is keeping a clear checklist so the technicians have that reminder while they're on site, and we're keeping a homogeneous experience between client A and client B, whether they're in Nashville or they're in Minneapolis.
Very good. Well, I don't know, and Jordan can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we have anything in the Q&A, so it looks like we covered a lot of what everybody was looking for. I do want to mention that I just launched the post-webinar poll, if everybody wouldn't mind filling that out as an attendee. And I definitely want to thank John and Claire, Piper, Ryan, and Eric. Thank you so much for being with us today. A lot of good stuff in here. Until next time.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.